Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Eigen Values podcast. This is an audio-visual version of the Eigen Values Substack that can be found at davidturver.substack.com. This week we cover the differing claims about the mineral intensity of different electricity generation technologies. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to receive more content. Introduction. The material intensity of different electricity generation technologies is a hotly contested debate. There are many studies that have analysed the topics, for instance from the US Department of Energy and the UNECE. However, technology is continuously improving, and the Breakthrough Institute has recently produced a new analysis with up-to-date figures. This article recaps the findings of the DOE and takes an in-depth look at the new Breakthrough Institute paper to identify anomalies. Let's discuss first the US DOE Quadrennial Technology Review. Although billed as a quadrennial review, it appears that the last report was produced in 2015. Of course, that report will have used data from an earlier period, so by now is well out of date. The Breakthrough Institute reproduced a chart using the US DOE data that is shown in Figure 1. This shows that the total mineral requirements of over 16,000 tonnes per terawatt-hour for solar power, over 10,000 tonnes per terawatt-hour for wind power, with nuclear at 920 tonnes per terawatt-hour. Note that the tonnes per terawatt-hour is approximately equal to the kilograms per gigawatt-hour units used below. The new Breakthrough Institute analysis uses updated data and shows improvements for wind, solar and nuclear compared to the DOE analysis. This is shown in Figure 2. Solar power shows the biggest improvement of 89%, with material intensity falling to just over 1,800 kilograms per gigawatt-hour. Assuming the DOE analysis was for onshore wind, this is improved by 31% to almost 7,100 kilograms per gigawatt-hour. The Breakthrough Institute has also analysed how much rock must be moved to produce the minerals required for each energy source, and their chart is reproduced in Figure 3. In this chart, they also show coal and natural gas. As can be seen, coal is virtually off the charts, and the low-carbon technologies pale into insignificance. Their treatment of natural gas, though, is somewhat suspect. The 120,000 kilograms of rock per gigawatt-hour refers to the mass of gas used to produce a gigawatt-hour of electricity. This is somewhat disingenuous because gas is not rock, and relatively little rock is removed in the process of drilling a gas well. No doubt there have been some technological improvements since before 2015. However, the improvements in mineral intensity for wind and solar are considerable. So what has driven these improvements? It takes some delving into their data sheets to work out how they've calculated their results. For solar power, they've assumed a capacity factor of 24% and an asset life of 30 years. While such a high capacity factor might be achievable in Texas, for instance, in the UK we achieved an average of only 10.5% in the past 5 years. For onshore wind, they have assumed 35% and 25 years, and for offshore wind, 55% and 30 years. The DOE did not disclose their equivalent assumptions, but they're well in excess of what has been achieved in practice in the UK. We achieved 5-year average capacity factors of 26% for onshore wind and 41% for offshore. Moreover, feed-in tariff and renewables obligations last for only 20 years, with contracts for difference lasting only 15 years. It is unlikely that grid-scale power plants will be commercially viable without subsidy, so the asset life should be curbed accordingly. Assuming high capacity factors and long asset lives pushes up the lifetime generation of these technologies and so reduces the mineral intensity per gigawatt-hour generated. It's also noteworthy that they assume relatively low capacity factor of 85% for nuclear and a short asset life of 60 years, especially when one considers that the US has granted life extensions to 80 years for some existing plants. Figure 4 compares the Breakthrough Institute results with the results obtained after adjusting the wind and solar capacity factors to UK averages and the asset life to 20 years. Nuclear power has been adjusted to a 90% capacity factor and an 80-year asset life. The material intensity for nuclear falls 29%, while the mineral intensity for solar goes up 243% to 6,201 kilograms per gigawatt hour, and that for onshore wind increases 68% to 11,935 kilowatts per gigawatt hour, and offshore rises 101% to 3,930 kilograms per gigawatt hour. Solar is much better than the DOE figures, but onshore wind is worse. We saw in Figure 2 above that the Breakthrough Institute has also considered the material intensity of LFP batteries. However, their analysis is somewhat flawed. First, their chart says they assume 2 gigawatt hour battery charging and discharging by 1 gigawatt hour per day over a 25-year life, which would be 9,125 gigawatt hours discharged to the grid over the lifetime. However, their Excel model shows 18,250 gigawatt hours discharged to the grid over the lifetime, or 2 gigawatt hours per day. Moreover, if one considers charging and discharging losses, the battery makes a negative contribution to the grid because it consumes energy as it charges. Second, they effectively assume the batteries are standalone and not part of a wider system. In reality, a certain level of battery storage will be required by solar or a wind farm to scavenge electricity at times of peak supply when demand is low and return it to the grid when supply is low and demand is high. The material required for this battery must then be added to the material requirements of the wind or solar farm to calculate the buffered material requirements of these technologies. Third, the expected life of an LFP battery is 5 to 10 years, or 3 to 5,000 charge cycles. Over the lifetime of the wind or solar farm, we expect that the battery needs to be replaced at least once. If we assume that each wind and solar farm requires 4 of these 2 gigawatt hour nominally sized batteries, each giving 1 gigawatt hour per day, 1 gigawatt hour effective capacity, or 4 gigawatt hours in total at a rate of 0.4 gigawatts over 8 hours each day, and each battery needs replacing after 10 years, then we get the buffered mineral intensity shown in Figure 5 below. The buffered material intensity of solar goes up 54% to 9,581 kilograms per gigawatt hour. Onshore wind increases 11% to 13,300 kilograms per gigawatt hour, and offshore wind rises 22% to 4,796 kilograms per gigawatt hour. At UK latitudes, to maintain a steady output for solar power will require enormous battery because of the massive interseasonal differences in generation. In practice, wind power would also require enormous battery because sometimes we can go for days with negligible wind generation. However, the material intensity would then go off the charts. This is why batteries can only be considered for very short-term storage, and we have not yet solved the long-duration energy storage problem. As we have seen, the mineral intensity of different electricity generation technologies is extremely sensitive to the assumptions made during the calculations. Moreover, the output of solar farms in particular is highly sensitive to latitude. Tropical latitudes can achieve capacity factors assumed by the Breakthrough Institute. However, in more temperate latitudes like the UK, then capacity factors are much lower. Any calculation of the mineral intensity of solar power should show different values for a range of latitudes. The material intensity of wind power is also very sensitive to load factor and asset life. We must use realistic assumptions if we are to calculate results that are meaningful in the real world. The whole subject of the amount of storage required to mitigate the intermittency of wind and solar power is under-analysed. However, it's more sensible to add the minerals required for batteries to those of the generation technology than to treat batteries as standalone entities. My clear conclusion from this is that nuclear and gas have the smallest material intensity, and if we really care about the total environment, then these technologies should be our focus. If you've enjoyed this article, please share it with your family, friends and colleagues, and sign up to receive more content at davidturver.substack.com. That's davidturver.substack.com. Thank you for listening.